Chapter 1. Staying in Love After the Wedding. Countless couples grapple with a profound mystery. Why does the vibrant affection shared before marriage so often wither away once the vows are spoken? Many hopeful partners seek remedies through seminars and relationship workshops, absorbing brilliant strategies for connection, only to return to their daily lives completely incapable of putting those tools into practice. The core mission here is to uncover the root of this widespread relational failure. The vast library of existing relationship advice isn't inherently flawed. Rather, it frequently misses a foundational reality of human connection. Individuals inherently give and receive emotional affection in entirely different dialects. During our formative years, we absorb the emotional tongue of our family environment, making it our primary method of connecting. While it is entirely possible to acquire fluency in secondary tongues later in life, doing so demands significant conscious effort. This linguistic diversity is an undeniable fabric of human civilization, and it translates directly to the realm of romance. Your inherent emotional language might be as completely foreign to your partner as English is to someone who only speaks Chinese. No degree of earnest effort spoken in your native tongue will bridge the gap if your partner simply cannot interpret it. Earnest intentions fall short. True communication requires the deliberate mastery of the beloved's primary language. Decades of guiding troubled marriages have revealed that emotional affection is generally categorized into 5 foundational languages, encompassing the primary ways humanity communicates care. Within these 5 pillars exist countless variations and dialects, restricted only by human creativity. The imperative, however, remains unchanged. You must speak the specific language your partner intuitively understands. Mastering this unique emotional dialect unlocks the door to enduring, resilient matrimony. Affection does not have to vanish into the ether after the honeymoon. Sustaining it, however, will require the conscious discipline of learning a new way to express care. Woven into the very fabric of our being is a profound yearning for intimate connection and the deep reassurance of being cherished by another soul. The institution of marriage was fundamentally woven to satisfy this exact hunger for closeness. Ancient wisdom traditions vividly describe this union as two becoming a single entity. This does not imply a tragic loss of individual selfhood or personal identity. Rather, it signifies a profound merging where two people deeply interlace their lives. Yet the echoes of marital despair are all too common, with partners lamenting the death of their bond, the evaporation of closeness, and a mutual failure to fulfill each other's deepest yearnings. These painful realities point to a hidden truth. Every individual from childhood through adulthood possesses an internal reservoir of affection. Maintaining the fullness of this emotional vessel is as critical to the survival of a relationship as engine oil is to the functioning of a vehicle. Attempting to navigate the complexities of a lifelong partnership with a depleted emotional reservoir is a guaranteed path to severe relational damage. Regardless of its current state, the vitality of a union can always be elevated. A profound shift occurs when one begins to comprehend and utilize their partner's primary emotional dialect. It can completely transform their demeanor and actions. A human being operating from a place of emotional abundance and security behaves vastly differently than one starved of affection. Before diving into the mechanics of these specific languages, it is vital to untangle the intoxicating, often misleading phenomenon of romantic infatuation. At its zenith, this emotional high is profoundly euphoric, trapping both individuals in a state of wonderful, consuming obsession. The beloved dominates the final waking thoughts of the night, and the very first stirrings of the morning. A desperate yearning for proximity eclipses all else, blinding the individual to any potential flaws in their partner. Society often perpetuates the myth that this initial soaring ecstasy is the true face of eternal romance. We are lulled into believing that these flawless, indestructible feelings will persist undisturbed against any external force. Inevitably, however, gravity reasserts itself, and the ethereal flight ends in a return to stark reality. The veil of perfection lifts, revealing the ordinary human imperfections and irritating idiosyncrasies of the once flawless partner. The realization dawns that this person harbors the capacity for anger, capable of unleashing harsh judgments and wounding words. Minor habits, once entirely invisible under the spell of infatuation, suddenly morph into insurmountable sources of conflict. This is the harsh landscape of authentic cohabitation, where mundane disputes over household chores and bathroom habits replace poetic declarations. Within this raw environment, a fleeting glance can inflict deep pain, and a carelessly spoken sentence can cause profound emotional destruction. The sanctuary of the partnership mutates into a theater of war, turning former lovers into bitter adversaries. The initial infatuation was essentially a masterful emotional deception, an illusion that coaxed two people into a permanent legal and spiritual binding. The intoxicating feelings were genuine, but they were built upon an unsustainable foundation of flawless perception. This initial euphoria falsely convinces couples that they have already achieved deep, enduring intimacy and the power to effortlessly vanquish any future hardship. Confronting the aftermath of this illusion leaves many feeling trapped, seemingly forced to choose between a life of quiet marital agony or abandoning the union altogether to chase the fleeting high once more. There remains, however, a more profound and rewarding path. It demands acknowledging that the initial infatuation was merely a temporary emotional high, and consciously shifting focus toward cultivating a deliberate, authentic affection. True psychological and emotional well-being requires that our deep-seated hunger for connection be consistently nourished. Spouses harbor a desperate need to feel secure and cherished within their union. When an individual is anchored by the certainty of their partner's affection, their internal reservoir overflows, empowering them to face the world with brilliance and achieve their ultimate purpose. Chapter 2. Love Language. Chapter 1. Words of Affirmation. A profound avenue for expressing emotional devotion is through the deliberate use of uplifting language. Ancient wisdom literature, penned by Solomon, profoundly declares that the tongue wields the very forces of life and death. Countless partnerships suffer because they have never grasped the monumental power hidden within verbal validation. As Solomon also observed, while anxiety burdens the human spirit, a gentle and kind utterance has the power to elevate it. Delivering verbal praise and explicit expressions of gratitude serves as a remarkably potent method of transferring emotional warmth. These expressions find their greatest impact in pure, unadorned declarations of approval. Acknowledging a partner's sharp appearance in a suit, their striking look in a dress, their unmatched skill in preparing a simple potato dish, or simply expressing deep gratitude for their effort in washing the evening dishes, these are the direct, powerful building blocks of verbal affection. Encouraging words represent another vital dialect within this emotional language. To encourage fundamentally means to instill courage within another soul. Every human being harbors hidden pockets of insecurity and self-doubt. This inherent lack of bravery frequently paralyzes individuals, preventing them from pursuing the meaningful endeavors they quietly desire. A wealth of untapped potential resides within your partner, dormant within their areas of vulnerability, silently awaiting the spark of your encouragement. The vast majority of people possess far more capability than they will ever develop, restrained primarily by an absence of courage. A devoted partner can act as the crucial catalyst that unlocks this buried promise. Naturally, offering such supportive declarations might feel intensely unnatural or difficult to articulate. It may not be an inherent emotional tongue, requiring immense conscious exertion to master this secondary language. This struggle is particularly pronounced if a historical communication style has relied heavily on criticism and condemnation, yet the profound transformation it yields makes the rigorous effort entirely worthwhile. Kind words dictate that authentic devotion is inherently gentle, meaning verbal communication must be wrapped in softness. This principle is deeply tied to the specific manner and delivery of speech. A single phrase can convey vastly contradictory messages depending entirely on the inflection used. A gentle, tender declaration of love serves as a pure conduit of affection. However, transforming that same phrase into a questioning tone instantly subverts its entire meaning. Frequently, individuals broadcast conflicting signals, where the literal definition of the words contradicts the sharp tone carrying them. In these instances, a partner will almost universally decode the message based on the emotional tone rather than the sterile vocabulary. The acoustic delivery of thoughts is paramount. An ancient proverb wisely notes that a gentle response diffuses wrath. When a partner is inflamed with anger and projecting heated rhetoric, the loving response is to refuse retaliation with matching hostility, opting instead for a deliberate, softened tone. If their interpretation of your actions is skewed, a gentle demeanor allows you to clarify true intentions without escalating the conflict. The objective becomes a pursuit of mutual understanding and relational repair, rather than a stubborn crusade to validate one's own perception as the sole objective truth. This embodies the essence of mature, evolving affection within a thriving union. True love stubbornly refuses to maintain an inventory of past transgressions or resurrect historical failures, acknowledging that human perfection is a myth. In the crucible of cohabitation, individuals inevitably falter, inflicting pain through misguided actions and careless speech. The timeline cannot be reversed. The past remains fixed. The only viable path forward involves an honest admission of the wrong and a sincere pursuit of pardon, coupled with a genuine commitment to alter future behavior. Demanding strict justice and seeking punitive measures against a partner fundamentally reconfigures the relationship into that of a magistrate and a criminal. In such a dynamic, true closeness is annihilated, whereas consciously granting forgiveness serves as the crucial mechanism for restoring intimacy. Humble words reveal that affection expresses itself through gentle requests, utterly rejecting the harshness of demands. The moment directives are issued, one artificially elevates themselves to a parental role, reducing the partner to a subordinate child. A healthy marriage fundamentally requires the recognition of both individuals as equal, fully realized adult partners. Cultivating profound intimacy relies heavily on a mutual understanding of each other's inner longings. However, the specific phrasing used to communicate these desires determines the survival of the connection. Presenting needs as rigid ultimatums immediately eradicates the potential for closeness, driving a wedge between the couple. Conversely, articulating needs as humble petitions provides gentle direction rather than tyrannical dictates. Various dialects exist within this foundational language of verbal affirmation. Beyond the variations already explored, an expansive array of nuanced expressions exists, extensively documented in expansive volumes and literature. The unifying thread across these dialects is the deliberate employment of language to elevate and validate the partner. A practical strategy for expanding this vocabulary is to actively record positive affirmations encountered in external conversations or formal lectures. Over time, this practice yields a formidable lexicon of appreciative phrasing ready for use. Another powerful dialect involves the strategic use of indirect affirmation, speaking highly of a partner in their absence. These commendations inevitably find their way back to the partner, amplifying the emotional impact and crediting the speaker. Extolling a spouse's virtues to their own mother guarantees that the praise will be echoed back with increased resonance. Similarly, publicly validating a partner in the presence of others is deeply affirming. When accepting public recognition for a personal triumph, consciously sharing that honor with one's spouse solidifies the bond. Furthermore, committing these affirmations to the written word offers a unique advantage. The tangible nature of a written declaration allows the recipient to revisit and absorb the affection repeatedly across time. If your spouse's love language is words of affirmation, it becomes essential to implement daily, conscious reminders that spoken language holds monumental importance within the union. Translating those internal feelings into a physical love letter provides enduring comfort that can be held and reread. Finally, committing to the rigorous daily discipline of offering a sincere compliment to the spouse for an entire month can fundamentally restructure the emotional landscape of the relationship. Chapter 3. Love Language. Number 2. Quality time. Sitting intimately on a couch and offering 20 minutes of completely undivided focus to a partner is the equivalent of exchanging 20 minutes of life itself. This time is irretrievable. It is a literal giving of one's life to another. This act stands as an intensely powerful mechanism for transmitting emotional affection. A fundamental pillar of this language is the concept of togetherness. This does not merely imply physical closeness. Two individuals occupying the exact same physical space are in proximity, but they are not inherently together. True togetherness requires absolute focused attention. Consider a parent sitting on the floor with a toddler. If their focus is completely on the child and not the toy they are rolling, they are genuinely together for that specific duration. Conversely, attempting to engage with the child while simultaneously conversing on a telephone severely dilutes that attention. In the same vein, partners engaging in a shared activity, such as a game of tennis, are only experiencing authentic connection if their primary focus is on the shared experience rather than the mechanics of the sport. The critical element is the emotional connection occurring beneath the surface. Much like the language of affirmation, this second language boasts numerous dialects, a prominent one being quality conversation. This entails deeply sympathetic dialogue where partners exchange experiences, internal thoughts, shifting feelings, and core desires within a secure, uninterrupted environment. This is distinct from verbal affirmation. While affirming words emphasize what is being actively spoken, quality conversation heavily prioritizes what is being carefully heard. Utilizing this dialect means dedicating that shared time to drawing the partner out and absorbing their words with deep sympathy. A thriving relationship demands this empathetic ear, aiming to fully grasp the internal landscape of the other individual. Mastering this deep listening can feel as daunting as acquiring a foreign language, yet it is absolutely mandatory for effective emotional communication. Essential practices for this include holding steady eye contact while the partner speaks, refusing the urge to multitask, actively listening for underlying emotions rather than merely facts, carefully observing physical body language, and strictly suppressing the impulse to interrupt. Beyond listening, quality conversation mandates the vulnerability of self-revelation, which requires learning to talk. A spouse lamenting that they never truly know their partner's internal state is fundamentally begging for intimacy. To fulfill this need, the guarded partner must consciously choose to reveal their inner self. If a partner requires deep conversation to feel loved, their emotional reservoir will remain empty until these thoughts and feelings are transparently shared. Personality heavily dictates these communicative tendencies. One common psychological profile mimics the Dead Sea. It endlessly receives experiences and thoughts throughout the day, storing them in a massive internal reservoir, yet it gives nothing out, perfectly content in absolute silence. Conversely, the babbling brook profile instantly verbalizes everything processed through the eyes or ears, rarely allowing a minute to pass between observation and speech. These starkly different types frequently attract one another in courtship, creating a seemingly perfect balance. However, years into the union, the highly vocal partner inevitably realizes they do not actually know the silent one, while the silent partner desperately wishes for a cessation of the constant verbal flow. The redemptive reality is that both temperaments are capable of change. Quiet individuals can acquire the skill of speech, and highly vocal individuals can master the art of silence. Establishing a daily routine where each partner shares 3 specific events from their day, alongside their corresponding emotional reactions, serves as a vital minimum requirement for marital health. Committing to this daily baseline slowly facilitates a more natural and abundant flow of meaningful dialogue. Another crucial dialect encompasses quality activities. This involves engaging in any pursuit that captures the interest of at least one partner. The specific nature of the activity is entirely secondary to the underlying motivation. The genuine goal is to cultivate a shared experience, allowing the partner to walk away feeling profoundly cared for because their spouse willingly participated in something they value and did so with an uplifting attitude. A vital secondary benefit of these shared endeavors is the creation of a rich repository of memories to draw upon in future years. Recalling peaceful morning walks, shared labor in a spring garden, or unexpected comedic mishaps in the woods solidifies the bond. These shared historical markers are incredibly precious memories of love, particularly for the individual whose primary emotional language is rooted in time spent together. If your spouse's love language is quality time, practical integration of this language requires deliberate action. It might involve taking a nostalgic walk through a partner's childhood neighborhood and asking detailed questions about their early years. It could mean formalizing time together by scheduling a specific appointment for a meal. Further integration requires actively seeking out a partner's desires, perhaps asking them to curate a list of 5 preferred shared activities. Ultimately, it involves the selfless act of identifying a pursuit the partner deeply cherishes and choosing to participate, even if it inherently brings very little personal pleasure to the one performing the act of love. Chapter 4. Love Language. 3. Receiving gifts. A physical present is fundamentally a tangible manifestation of a person's inner thoughts. It serves as a visual declaration that one individual actively held another in their mind. The monetary value attached to the object is largely irrelevant. The true weight lies in the psychological focus directed toward the recipient. However, merely thinking about someone is insufficient. The affection is actualized through the deliberate physical process of acquiring and presenting the item. These tokens of devotion manifest in countless forms, ranging from extravagant purchases to completely free offerings. For an individual whose emotional reservoir relies on the reception of these tangible symbols, the financial price tag bears little consequence, provided it aligns reasonably with the family's economic reality. A lavishly wealthy individual exclusively offering trivial, inexpensive items might inadvertently breed resentment, yet in a household constrained by strict budgets, a minor, inexpensive token can effortlessly communicate an immeasurable depth of devotion. Gifts and money. Mastering the art of presenting tokens of affection frequently demands a rigorous reevaluation of one's personal philosophy regarding finances. Every person harbors a deeply ingrained, highly individualized psychological relationship with capital, carrying distinct emotional responses tied to its disbursement. Certain individuals inherently operate with an outward flowing orientation, deriving genuine psychological satisfaction from the act of purchasing. Conversely, others are wired with a strict preservation mindset, anchoring their emotional security to the disciplined accumulation and strategic investment of their resources. Those inclined towards spending will face minimal psychological friction when acquiring presents for their partner. However, for the deeply ingrained saver, the mere concept of utilizing capital as a vehicle for emotional expression will inevitably trigger profound internal resistance. Overcoming this barrier requires a profound paradigm shift, recognizing that purchasing a meaningful token for a partner who requires this specific dialect is, in reality, the most secure and lucrative investment one could possibly make. Capital deployed in this manner directly funds the relational bond, filling the partner's emotional reserves. Consequently, a partner overflowing with inner security will naturally reflexively project that devotion back in a dialect the giver can intimately comprehend. The gift of self beyond material acquisitions, an infinitely more profound invisible offering exists that often eclipses any physical object. This is the profound offering of absolute physical presence. Manifesting physically during moments of profound vulnerability or need speaks with deafening volume to a soul whose primary dialect involves receiving. Consider the painful narrative of a wife who carried a lifelong resentment, utterly convinced her husband valued recreational sports above her existence. Her devastation was rooted in the day she brought their child into the world. While her husband remained present for the immediate birth, he departed moments later to participate in a softball game, abandoning her during a highly vulnerable and monumental life event. Had he flooded her hospital room with extravagant floral arrangements, those physical items would have utterly failed to compensate for the emotional void left by his absence. Over a decade later, the emotional trauma remained as raw as the day it was inflicted. This profound emotional injury was further compounded when he repeated this exact pattern following the devastating loss of her mother, departing immediately after the burial services to pursue the same athletic distraction. When confronted, the husband's perspective revealed a tragic misinterpretation of emotional requirements. He genuinely believed his presence during the labor and actual birth was entirely sufficient, completely missing the lingering need for shared emotional processing. In the aftermath of her mother's passing, he focused entirely on the practical support he provided beforehand, dedicating a full week to manual labor and hospital visits. Having completed what he perceived as his functional duty, he sought an athletic outlet to alleviate his own immense psychological strain, falsely assuming his grieving wife would support his need for recuperation. This catastrophic disconnect highlights a severe failure to comprehend the monumental gravity of absolute presence. Standing beside a partner during an acute crisis is the most vital, life-sustaining offering one can bestow upon a mate who speaks this specific language. It is imperative to vocalize this need clearly, rather than relying on silent expectations of psychic understanding. When a partner explicitly requests physical presence, that plea must be treated with the utmost reverence. The fundamental core of all romantic devotion is inherently rooted in the spirit of selfless giving. While all dialects require outward effort, for certain souls, the reception of these visible, tangible symbols is the only resonant voice of true affection. If your spouse's love language is receiving gifts, when integrating this language into daily existence, consider orchestrating a continuous sequence of thoughtful offerings. This might manifest as leaving a small, sweet indulgence in the early hours, arranging for the arrival of botanicals as the day wanes, and concluding the evening with a carefully selected garment. The offering need not be purchased. Handcrafting a deeply personal item holds immense power. Furthermore, committing to the daily discipline of presenting a physical token for an entire week can rapidly restore a depleted emotional connection. Chapter 5. Love Language. 4. Acts of Service. Jesus Christ provided a profound yet remarkably simple demonstration of expressing affection through a deliberate act of service when he knelt to wash the feet of his followers. Within that ancient culture, where individuals traveled on dusty roads wearing sandals, this specific task was universally reserved for the household servant to perform upon the arrival of guests. Having explicitly commanded his disciples to love one another, Jesus utilized a basin and a towel to provide a tangible model of that devotion, subsequently urging them to replicate his actions. Prior to this event, he had radically inverted the standard social hierarchy by declaring that true greatness within his kingdom was synonymous with servanthood. Unlike typical societal structures where those in positions of power fiercely dominate their subordinates, Christ established that true prominence is achieved through the service of others. The Apostle Paul later distilled this entire philosophy into a single directive, urging individuals to serve one another through the vehicle of love. Doormat or lover? Consider the tragic confession of a spouse who spent 2 decades performing relentless domestic duties, waiting on her partner endlessly, enduring mistreatment and suffering public humiliation, ultimately culminating in deep resentment and a desperate desire to escape the marriage. This individual had meticulously executed acts of service for 20 years, yet these actions were fundamentally void of genuine love. Instead, they were entirely fueled by internal fear, overwhelming guilt, and festering resentment. It is vital to distinguish between a willing lover and an inanimate doormat. A doormat is a lifeless object, subjected to being stepped upon and kicked aside precisely because it lacks personal agency. It functions strictly as a servant, never as a romantic partner. The moment a spouse is reduced to an object of utility, the very possibility of authentic affection is utterly destroyed. Employing guilt as a manipulative tactic to extract labor, suggesting that a good partner would naturally perform a specific task, entirely contradicts the true language of devotion. Similarly, relying on fear and the threat of reprisal to coerce obedience is a complete distortion of intimacy. No human being should ever permit themselves to be utilized as a mere floor covering. Genuine love requires the fortitude to say that one cares too deeply about the relationship to allow such destructive mistreatment to continue, recognizing that it poisons both individuals involved. Overcoming stereotypes. Acquiring fluency in the language of service will frequently demand a rigorous and uncomfortable dismantling of deeply entrenched stereotypes regarding traditional gender roles within a household. One husband found himself automatically mimicking the domestic patterns established by his parents, assuming his responsibilities were strictly limited to exterior maintenance like lawn care, while vehemently rejecting the idea of vacuuming or managing infant care. Fortunately, upon recognizing the profound emotional importance these tasks held for his wife, he demonstrated the willingness to shatter his preconceived notions. This psychological flexibility is absolutely mandatory if a partner's primary emotional dialect requires actions that conflict with one's internalized gender roles. While sweeping sociological shifts over recent decades have largely erased a single, monolithic standard for male and female duties, this evolution has not eradicated stereotypes, rather it has exponentially multiplied them. The constant influence of media and the rise of diverse family structures mean that internal models of domestic life are shaped by countless external forces. Consequently, it is highly probable that any two partners will enter a union with notably different assumptions regarding the proper division of household labor. A sincere readiness to critically analyze and adjust these rigid internal blueprints is essential for the effective transmission of love. The transformative power of this shift is evident in the experience of a couple whose entire dynamic was restructured. Despite both partners launching demanding careers simultaneously, the husband possessed a blind spot regarding domestic labor, instinctively assuming the entirety of the household burden belonged exclusively to his wife. However, upon grasping the mechanics of this love language, a radical shift occurred, and he consistently began asking how he could assist her each evening. This initial shock gave way to a lasting, multi-year transformation. Naturally, this transition involved chaotic learning curves, including a disastrous laundry attempt where undiluted bleach transformed colored towels into spotted ruins. Yet, the underlying truth remained. He was deliberately communicating in her required dialect, causing her emotional reserves to overflow, which in turn inspired her to fluently speak his language in return. The concept itself is incredibly straightforward, though executing it is far from effortless. Eradicating decades of ingrained behavioral conditioning requires intense, deliberate labor. Nevertheless, consciously choosing to master and utilize a partner's primary emotional dialect guarantees a monumental improvement in the psychological atmosphere of the marriage. If your spouse's love language is acts of service, practical application requires disciplined observation and action. Begin by compiling a comprehensive inventory of the specific requests your partner has voiced over recent weeks. Methodically choose one item from this list each week and execute it purely as a tangible demonstration of devotion. To amplify the impact, consistently provide a written declaration of affection alongside a completed act of service at regular intervals throughout the month. Additionally, coordinating with children to collectively perform a helpful task for the partner further reinforces the environment of service and care. Chapter 6. Love Language. Number 5. Physical Touch. Tactile connection stands as a profoundly potent conduit for transmitting devotion within a marital bond. Acts such as clasping hands, sharing an embrace, kissing, and the intimacy of sexual union are all vital mechanisms for communicating emotional warmth to a partner. For certain individuals, this physical contact is their absolute foundational language of affection, and in its absence, they feel utterly disconnected and unloved. Conversely, when this need is met, their internal emotional reserves overflow, anchoring them firmly in the security of their partner's devotion. The presence or absence of this physical connection possesses the power to either fortify or dismantle a relationship, silently broadcasting messages of intense care or profound rejection. To a soul whose primary dialect is tactile, a physical gesture will echo far louder than any verbalized declaration of hatred or adoration. While physical violence, such as a slap, inflicts trauma on anyone, it utterly annihilates the spirit of an individual whose core emotional language is rooted in touch. In stark contrast, a gentle embrace acts as a deafening proclamation of love for that same individual. This absolute reliance on physical affirmation extends directly into adulthood and marriage. Because nerve endings are distributed across the entire human form, almost any tender contact can serve as a valid expression of devotion. However, this does not imply that all forms of contact are perceived equally. Specific gestures will inevitably generate deeper resonance than others. The ultimate authority on this matter is the partner receiving the affection. They alone possess the profound understanding of what constitutes a genuinely loving caress. It is a grave error to force a specific style or schedule of contact. One must meticulously study and adopt the specific tactile dialect the partner requires. Assuming that the physical gestures which bring you personal comfort will automatically translate to their emotional fulfillment is a dangerous misconception. Affectionate contact can manifest in explicit forms requiring dedicated focus, such as a deliberate massage or the focused attention of sexual foreplay and intercourse. Alternatively, it can take subtle, implicit forms that demand only a fleeting second, like resting a hand upon a shoulder during a mundane task or gently brushing against them while navigating a shared space. Explicit interactions naturally necessitate a greater investment of time and deliberate energy to master. If a deep tissue massage speaks volumes of love to a spouse, the resources dedicated to mastering that specific skill yield immeasurable dividends. Should sexual intimacy be the primary dialect, committing to a deeper understanding and communication regarding the nuances of lovemaking will drastically elevate the relational bond. Implicit contact, while brief, demands continuous mental awareness, posing a unique challenge for individuals who were not raised in highly physically affectionate environments. Choosing to sit in close physical proximity on a sofa during leisure time requires 0 additional minutes in the day. Yet, it transmits a monumental message of care. Reaching out for a brief contact while passing through a living space takes merely a fraction of a second. Establishing a ritual of a brief kiss or embrace upon parting and reuniting forms an unshakable daily foundation of love. The body is for touching. The entirety of a human being's identity and essence is housed within their physical vessel. Therefore, to make physical contact with a person's body is to make direct contact with their core self, just as physical withdrawal inherently creates vast emotional distance. This truth is reflected in broader societal norms, where a handshake serves as a universal symbol of psychological openness and interpersonal connection. When an individual actively refuses to offer this basic physical gesture to another, it forcefully signals a severe fracture or hostility within that relationship. Crisis and physical touch. During moments of acute tragedy or distress, human beings operate almost entirely on instinct, immediately reaching out to embrace one another. This universal reaction occurs precisely because physical contact is unparalleled in its ability to transmit profound comfort and love, which is the singular most critical requirement during times of profound darkness. While one cannot alter the devastating reality of external events, the presence of physical affection provides the necessary emotional armor to endure them. It is an inescapable reality that every long-term union will navigate periods of severe hardship, from the inevitable loss of parental figures to sudden illnesses and unforeseen tragedies. Life is inherently interwoven with deep disappointments, making the steadfast provision of love the absolute most vital duty one can perform for a suffering partner. If a spouse relies upon tactile connection as their primary language, no action is more crucial than physically holding them through their grief. In these moments, spoken consolations hold almost zero value, whereas a steadfast physical presence powerfully verifies an unbroken commitment. These intense periods of sorrow offer a profound window to demonstrate unwavering devotion, and those tender, anchoring touches will remain deeply etched in memory long after the storm subsides. Conversely, withdrawing physical support during an hour of desperate need creates an emotional scar that may never fully fade. If your spouse's love language is physical touch, practical integration of this dialect into everyday life requires constant, intentional proximity. Navigating a public space, such as walking toward a destination, provides a simple yet profound opportunity to reach out and interlock hands. Upon reuniting at the end of a long day, consciously closing the distance to offer a robust and immediate embrace establishes an immediate foundation of emotional security. Furthermore, utilizing intentional, nurturing touch, such as offering a massage to alleviate the day's physical burdens, serves as a powerful and deeply connecting prelude to deeper intimacy. Chapter 7. Discovering Love That Lasts. Identifying the partner's primary emotional dialect is an absolute prerequisite for maintaining a thriving internal reservoir of affection. However, before extending this effort outward, one must first deeply investigate and comprehend their own core emotional requirements. While traversing the 5 foundational expressions of devotion, affirming language, undivided attention, tangible tokens, dedicated labor, and tactile connection, some individuals will experience an immediate, piercing recognition of their own needs and those of their spouse. For many others, however, this realization remains obscured and requires deliberate introspection. Unearthing this internal reality demands asking profound questions about what generates the deepest feelings of being cherished and what is desired above all other interactions. 3 critical pathways exist for this self-discovery. The first involves analyzing the deepest wounds inflicted by a partner's actions or inactions. The exact inverse of that agonizing pain inevitably reveals one's vital emotional language. The second pathway requires examining the pleas and demands most frequently directed toward the spouse, as these recurring requests are powerful indicators of what is desperately needed to feel secure. The final method is observing how one naturally defaults to expressing care for their partner, as humans instinctively broadcast love in the exact dialect they subconsciously hope to receive. A critical obstacle often arises when partners are burdened by historical grievances, deeply seated anger, and the agonizing weight of past relational failures. The mechanism for transmitting affection through this dense fog of resentment is rooted in the fundamental reality of human agency. Humanity is defined by the profound capacity for conscious choice. This inherent freedom guarantees that all individuals have executed catastrophic judgments and destructive decisions. Every person has deployed weaponized language and engaged in behaviors that caused profound relational damage. While these destructive acts may have felt entirely justified in the heat of conflict, they ultimately remain a source of deep regret. However, a history stained by damaging choices does not condemn an individual to a future defined by them. The trajectory of a relationship can be radically altered through the conscious decision to issue a genuine apology, to express a definitive desire to restructure the future, and to commit to fulfilling the partner's precise emotional requirements. Marriages hovering on the absolute precipice of dissolution have been entirely resurrected the moment both individuals actively decide to engage in deliberate affection. While this conscious devotion cannot rewrite painful history, it possesses the absolute power to forge an entirely new reality moving forward. By intentionally executing actions aligned with a spouse's primary emotional dialect, a couple constructs a psychological sanctuary where historical conflicts and deep-seated resentments can finally be addressed and dismantled. Fulfilling a partner's need for love is not a passive feeling, but a rigorous, daily decision. By identifying and consistently speaking this required dialect, the deepest psychological vulnerabilities of the partner are secured, anchoring them safely within the union. When this conscious effort is mutual. Both individuals operate from a place of profound emotional abundance. This state of absolute relational contentment liberates their creative faculties, allowing them to pursue meaningful endeavors beyond the marriage while simultaneously cultivating an ever-expanding dynamic bond. Daily life frequently requires executing vital tasks that offer zero initial comfort or natural inclination. The simple act of rising from rest to face the dawn often directly contradicts physical desire, yet humans override these aversions, driven by a higher conviction that the ensuing hours hold necessary and valuable pursuits. Upon completing the day, the initial discomfort is entirely replaced by the deep satisfaction of accomplishment, proving that disciplined action must frequently precede the arrival of positive emotion. This precise mechanism governs enduring devotion. One must identify their partner's emotional requirement and rigorously execute it, regardless of whether it feels inherently comfortable or spontaneous. This is not a deceptive performance of false passion, but rather a selfless, calculated decision enacted purely for the psychological preservation of the beloved. By maintaining this discipline, the partner's emotional reservoir reaches capacity, drastically increasing the probability that they will mirror this effort in return. It is within this reciprocal exchange of deliberate action that authentic emotional warmth is reignited. True connection is an act of the will, and either participant possesses the absolute power to initiate this transformative cycle immediately. While affection is a paramount psychological requirement, human nature is simultaneously driven by other foundational hungers, primarily the absolute need for safety, internal value, and profound existential meaning. However, the presence of deeply rooted love intrinsically nourishes every single one of these adjacent psychological pillars. When an individual is enveloped in the certainty of their spouse's devotion, their nervous system achieves profound equilibrium, anchored by the knowledge that their partner is an unwavering ally. This cultivated sanctuary provides a critical counterbalance to the chaotic uncertainties and potential hostilities faced in professional environments and the broader world. Furthermore, an individual's internal metric of self-worth is deeply reinforced by the reality of being unconditionally chosen and cherished by their mate. The logical deduction becomes undeniable. Receiving profound affection validates one's inherent value. While early familial environments may have imparted fractured or deeply negative assessments of an individual's worth, the conscious devotion of a lifelong partner serves as a powerful, overriding truth. This focused affection systematically rebuilds the psychological architecture of self-esteem. Beyond safety and value, humanity is propelled forward by an intense craving for significance, a relentless drive to ensure one's existence bears permanent weight and meaning. Individuals construct elaborate definitions of success and exhaust themselves, striving to actualize those internal visions. The experience of being deeply loved exponentially amplifies this sense of ultimate purpose, solidifying the belief that if one soul holds them in such high regard, their existence is undeniably meaningful. Conversely, when a marital union is starved of this fundamental affection, every minor discrepancy in personality or preference is severely magnified. Spouses begin to view each other not as allies, but as dangerous impediments to their personal fulfillment. The home environment devolves into a theater of war where each person fights desperately for their own survival, worth, and meaning. While deliberate affection is not a magical panacea for all earthly struggles, it is the sole architect of the psychological safety required to untangle complex relational knots. Within this fortress of mutual care, a couple can dissect their profound differences entirely stripped of the venom of condemnation, allowing for authentic conflict resolution. Two fundamentally distinct individuals can forge a harmonious existence, actively discovering how to draw out the absolute best attributes hidden within one another. These are the monumental, life-altering dividends paid by conscious devotion. The question of whether a deadened romance can be resurrected from the ashes is answered with absolute certainty. It is entirely possible. The singular key to this revival remains the disciplined commitment to identifying the partner's vital emotional dialect and the unyielding choice to speak it consistently.